Your Excellency, dear fathers, ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to be here today. And I will read my notes, but hopefully they will not be too boring. Our first panel is about current tendencies and challenges of democracy. And in my paper, I want to indicate 5 main points. We here 4 and 5, maybe some are intersecting, so we will collect some number, which I believe are essential to understand the nature of populism. I will call them the 5 demons of democracy. I think in Catholic University we can use this language. At least it's understandable, right? So the first demon is unpleasant resemblance. When we usually think of populism, we oppose it to democracy. They are often seen as antithetic. Yet, have you noticed that etymologically, populism and democracy are connected? Both populism and democracy derive from the word people, populus, in Latin, and demos in ancient Greek. The bitter truth is that populism is impossible where democracy does not exist. It's possible only in the situation of existing democratic institutions, such as the universal suffrage and equality of citizens, when the masses of electorate are eligible to participate in political processes. Only then one can appeal to the mood of the people and try to adapt to the public consciousness in order to obtain power. Because of our Ukrainian and post-Soviet totalitarian past, until recently our chances to slip into populism were minimal, which of course does not make it any better. It is because the very essence of totalitarian regimes lies in denying citizens political choices. However, another bitter truth is that although totalitarianism does not tolerate populism, it can directly derive from it. Second demon, social atomization and the threat of totalitarianism. In the Ukrainian political discourse, the term populist is often described in the context of flirting with the masses. That's a direct translation from Ukrainian Political Science Dictionary. The dictionary defines populism as an activity that provides one's popularity within the masses at the cost of unreasonable promises, demagogic slogans, etc. The word masses, which I use here so often, is rather a modern invention. It became extensively popular in the 20th century. Jose Ortega Gasset, Herbert Marcuse, Karl Meinhen, and many other intellectuals described numerous different aspects and traits of a new man of the masses. Martin Heidegger, who could hardly be suspected in lively interest in current social issues, also pointed to the anonymous Das Mann. Yet here I would like to bring to your attention Hannah Arendt's Origins of Totalitarianism, which already were mentioned today, where she states that it is mass society that was one of the main preconditions of totalitarianism. The man of the masses is alienated, atomized, and socially isolated. Arendt writes that exhaustion from constant competition created by modernization and the rapid development of industry, today we would say of technologies, along with the lack of association with any social group, created the phenomenon of masses, which is not to be mistaken with the crowd. Being one among the masses is not characteristic of any social strata or class, but is rather a trait of one's emotional condition. Donald Trump, Brexit campaign activists, Marine Le Pen in France, all of them garner power from one source, distrust. Total distrust creates a phenomenon of negative solidarity, as Hannah Arendt calls it. Chantal Mouffe, a famous Belgian political theorist, in her interview called America in Populist Times, states that the populism is a result of political polarization between elites and the people, which occurs when democracy no longer plays a direct role in governing the people because of the elites' lack of representation and inability to understand society and its needs. But recent tendencies in the development of populism show that the new form of populism appears which is more complicated and intellectually sophisticated, which attracts also educated people and rich people alike, like, for example, the Netherlands' Thierry Baudet, who founded and leads the political party Forum for Democracy. And my colleagues, I have few colleagues in Netherlands who are also teaching in the universities there, they say this new type of populism is much more dangerous. It's more complicated, more sophisticated, it works on a different level. This means that populism is not for when the poor are against the rich, or when the people are against the elites. Populism is about atomism and social frustration, which is revealed in a negative solidarity. As we say in the proverb, the enemy of my enemy is a friend. And I remember many Americans, I was following closely the elections, the last elections in the United States, were voting against Trump or against Hillary Clinton. They were not voting really for something, or for political party, or for the program. And in Ukraine, we often recently also have the same tendency, voting against. So the enemies are uniting us and not the common goals. Third demon, political manichaeism and social radicalization. Emotional frustration requires rapid and understandable solutions, which populists are not able to provide. What they are able to provide, however, is pointing at a guilty enemy existing in a present situation. I call this phenomenon political manichaeism. Manichaeism was a religious sect of the 4th century Roman Empire, closely connected with Gnosticism. And Manichaeism's main principle is ontological dualism, which preached that both good and evil were the initial first principle of creation. The world's struggle is between light and darkness, good and evil, God and the devil. A contemporary populist skillfully uses the rhetoric of Manichaeism, which helps them not to delve deeper in the essence of problems, but instead allows them to single out the guilty and proclaim wars against them. Tired and desperate people want the world to be simple and understandable. A simple and understandable world is divided in black and white, good and bad. In times like this, there is a demand for Putin, Trump, and Viktor Orban. I don't feel good, and here's the man who can point out the guilty. Not only he can tell me what I want to hear, but also presents clear and quick solutions to the problem. Simple definitions require simple actions. The logical outcome of populist rhetoric is the radicalization of society that starts from stereotypization and aggressive language and finishing with hateful action towards other people or social groups. The guilty is known to us and we have to punish it. The French philosopher René Girard calls this tendency to solve the social tension through aggression, mimetic violence, in which a scapegoat must be defined and then sacrificed. In the condition of populist rhetoric, Christian culture is the first victim. Christianity, a religion of love based on principles of non-violence and love for neighbor, is reduced to a theoretical moral doctrine and replaced by alternative forms. In the discussion of we against them, it is more important to be Catholic or Orthodox than to be Christian, which is of course a paradox. The bad example of this we see today in Russia, where orthodoxy has become a part of political ideology and its true religious content has become secondary. Fourth, banality of goodness. Evil in our times stopped being banal. The banality of evil, Hannah Arendt's precise intuition about Nazism, is now a thing of the past. Not because it's not banal, but because it can be anything. Sometimes it is banal, and in other times it is not. Today, evil attracts many people, and what has become banal and boring is goodness. In the West, Putinophiles are very often aesthetes who search for something not banal, alternative, transgressing previously set boundaries. This is their big mistake. but it's also a mistake on Hannah Arendt's part. One cannot characterize ethical notions through aesthetical epithets because banal or not banal is a question of aesthetics. Evil can be indeed aesthetically attractive, but can also simultaneously be boring and deficient. Goodness, too, can be bright and creative, but can also be simple and naive. It's not banality or not non-banality that makes something good or evil, but something else. And fifth, paternalism. Also, the totalitarian Soviet system and the age-old democratic tradition have little in common. They both create the infantilism of the people. In the case of the totalitarian system, ignorance of political participation is to blame, whereas with the democratic tradition, it is the comfort and convenience of representation that leads to problem. The Ukrainian revolutions of 2004 and 2013 show the dynamics in which Ukrainian society developed. At first, we were expecting strong leader. But step by step, we rejected this idea for the sake of creating civil and social institutions. But this includes neither exponential nor smooth progress. Rather, development is like a wave sine curve. We go back and forth, and recently we see the desire to see the iron fist take hold of our lives. I think that in the Ukrainian situation, the reason for such a reversal can be simple exhaustion caused by traveling the long road to freedom, plagued with obstacles and pitfalls. In any case, populists love to use such an absence of social institutions and promise rapidly and personally to take care of our problems. Populism is not a self-sufficient ideology. Therefore, we often see it caught up in the tension between the radical right and radical left. According to the research of the Gershanin Institute, the party projects that bet on populism in Ukraine can count up to 33% of the electorate. The representatives from the sector are not ready to bear the burdens for the sake of reform. Their gender, age, birthplace are not important factors. Populists can embrace both rich and poor alike. So we can say that the major factor is ideological. These people share a similar set of views and conditions. Considering all of that, is democracy doomed to fall victim to populism and they take a radical turn into totalitarianism? I believe there are several things we should remember that can become a real strategy in the exorcism of these 5 demons. First, as in both old and contemporary times, democracy requires discussion. Since the very notion of politics is to balance the interest of many sides, the basic strategy of democracy and the precondition of its success is to foster public dialogue. I believe that one of the major reasons for global distrust towards elites in the Western world is that the politicians have learned to imitate discussions through mass media. Today in the world, to restore discussions to its today it's time to restore discussions to its true sense and to bring the agora back to democracy. The university has the chances for this because this is where the people meet every day, have opportunities for discussion, and as well, it is the place where new ideas and social imaginings are born. Second, university is not just a place where new ideas are born, but also it's a place where new leaders are raised. Catholic universities, especially in this Ukrainian context as we see it now, can give us what the most of the post-Soviet schools are not able to give, and what those universities amidst a malaise of relativism cannot give. I mean integrity and a sense of personal responsibility, which you mentioned today, people who care. Because moral norms of Catholic universities are not a declaration, but the principles of their own existence. Third, final one. Although populism and democracy have common etymological roots, populism is only an ideology, which we see in its ism suffix. Instead, democracy is an action. because the word itself means the rule of the people. This action requires solidarity and consolidation of efforts. But true positive solidarity does not appear rapidly, as, for example, the negative solidarity appears. Unfortunately, today we are united by enemies. What should instead unite us is a common vision of the future. Solidarity for something is a long process which requires finding common ground, common values, and common platform for action. I believe that Ukraine has potential here, and we must keep in mind that there are no shortcuts along this road. We thought there are. We were expecting after the first revolution and then after the second revolution, here we are, here finally at the door. But then it appears that the long work is going after that. The long-term destruction of trust wrought by the Soviet regime will take time to restore. And this work must be diligent, concerted, and repetitive. And sometimes boring too. As the Synod of Greek Catholic bishops stated, we want to emphasize that the Christian virtue of persisting in goodness is important not only for personal spiritual life, but it's also important for political and social life. Thank you.